Stay a while and listen. Today we will learn something new. What are reasons not to move to Silicon Valley? Anonymous wrote, unless you're working in tech, it probably doesn't make sense to live in the Bay Area. And, even then, if you don't have family here, nor entrepreneurship ambitions, you should try to look for a job in another location. Your lifestyle would be of higher quality. Pros of living in the Bay Area. The people. This is in first position for a reason. Living here, you'll meet passionate, brilliant, high energy, ambitious, creative people from everywhere in the world. It's hard to describe how invigorating that is, and how much of a difference it makes in your life. The ecosystem. If your goal, short or long term, is to build a tech company, the Bay Area is probably the best place to do it in the US, or even in the world. Sure, your burn rate will be 2-3x that if you went somewhere else, but you'll also have access to a lot more capital and talent. The salary. This one applies almost only to software engineers, and not to all of them. Sure, even the average salary for an entry-level engineer seems high here, $110k, but that's counterbalanced by California's high income tax and the insane rent. Think $3k/month for a one British rail. But you can have a very high salary as a resi here. Think $300k plus all included. The weather. It's very pleasing to live somewhere sunny all year long. Cons of living in the Bay Area. It's unsafe. I have a friend who got his car's window smashed every week, 4 weeks in a row. According to Neighborhood Scout, SF is in the top 2% most dangerous cities in the US. New York is in the top 27%. There are many neighborhoods in SF that are pretty scary, both at night and in the day. It's very dirty, and SF's homelessness is sky high. Not making any value judgment here. There probably are systemic issues etc. Just pointing at a fact. There are about 10,000 homeless people in SF's 47 square miles. Passing by 2 people, passed out on the sidewalk, with needles in their arm, on your morning walk, having someone pantless, smoking crack on your subway ride, or sitting next to you, and starting to masturbate when you take your coffee are not the best experiences, not even talking of routinely stepping onto human feces. Also, SF''S ideology can have you run into a lot of trouble if you dare even talk about this huge issue, like that time Twitter fired their head of VR one day into the job because they found out he'd written a rant on FB 4 years before about how bad homelessness had become in SF. This is the reason I'm writing this post anonymously. Its infrastructure is crumbling. SF's roads are in such a bad state that all the shaking sometimes makes it hard to use your phone in a car. The city is inundated, and massive potholes form almost every year when it rains a bit more than usual. In 2015, a 3-story lamppost, made of iron, badly damaged by urine, collapsed onto an occupied car. It's expensive. I mentioned it before, but the rent and taxes are crazy high, which makes it impossible for most people to build a family here. The reason why there are so few kids in the city. The situation is mostly due to rampant NIMBYism, basically landowners who have a vested interest in the housing supply being constrained, so it cannot meet demand, and sees its price appreciate, blocking all construction with stupid reasons like the charm of the neighborhood or not enough parking spots. It's monocultural. I, for one, working in tech, tend to like it. Anywhere you go, you'll meet smart engineers, working in big companies, telling you off the record stories about what they've been working on, or the shady hack they used to go around an issue. But if you're not in tech, it can become tiring, very quickly, to meet almost only this kind of people. Anonymous wrote, a few reasons. The biggest one, it's extremely expensive to live here. If you don't have a top-level tech income, you'll be struggling with overpriced crappy apartments and long commutes on crowded freeways. It is a bit of a political monoculture where, if you have any thoughts outside the standard blue state mainstream, you'll have a hard time making friends or socializing at work, unless you keep your opinions to yourself and silently nod when someone makes a political comment with which you're expected to auto-agree. It's also a bit bubblish in the same way a top university is. You forget that not everyone in the world is a book smart hypergrind. You'll find precious few among younger people in tech who grew up in any environment but the standard striver world. Parents who drove them everywhere and did everything for them. Carefully picked classes so they could get A's, good neighborhood, top school district, top university, top internship, etc. Such people are willing to work very hard but tend to be predictable and rather boring. On that score, immigrants tend to be more interesting than non-immigrants, as they've often had much more interesting lives. You have to be willing to ooh and AAH at TED Talks, which are often about zillionaires trying to convince themselves that they're somehow profound thinkers and not just people who got lucky. Ray wrote, I lived and worked there 25 plus years, and when I retired, I moved. If you move there, the first thing you'll notice is the cost of living, and right up front will be housing. San Jose has some affordable, cough, areas, but if you head north to Palo Alto, Cupertino, Saratoga, Atherton, and a host of other places, you'll quickly find the lots alone start at 7 digits and keep moving up. Apartments are obviously cheaper, but you'll still spend some serious coin. Figure on dropping $2,500 to $3,000/month for a decent place. If you need 3 bedrooms, you're probably above $4,000. The Below house, built in 1949, is 1,569 SF on an 8,000 SF lot and a price $2,385,000. Update, someone commented this seemed too high, so I replaced the picture with a listing. I didn't really search for an extreme value. This was on the front page of Zillow when I plugged in Palo Alto. But housing is only one piece of the cost puzzle. The Bay Area has some great weather, but one thing it doesn't have a lot of is water. My house was serviced by a private utility company along with about 100 others. During the summer, the water bill was about $1,000 a month. Yup, you read that correctly. I had a fairly big place, but only a half acre or so was watered, but the summer heat, expensive water, and less than optimum landscaping choices made for a ferocious bill. Electricity was also expensive. It was on a tiered system, but you plowed through that first tier so quickly you'd swear opening the garage door pushed you over the threshold. And that's the way it was for many items. Since everyone needs to live, they have to pay their bills, so local businesses have to charge more so they can pay their staff living wages. Lump it together, and you need a fair amount of money to get by. A different aspect is the pace of living. I didn't notice it at the time, because I was part of it, but life is a bit frenzied. There is no dawdling, not at the grocery stores nor shops nor restaurants. Everyone is in a hurry. If you like the leisurely coffee and talk and meeting some new people at the local Starbucks, it's not the right place. They're in a hurry. Starbucks wants to make room for new patrons, and probably you'll be in a hurry. Politically, it's very blue. If you have real hang-ups with gays or trans or hard-charging women, you aren't going to be very happy there. It's very much alive and let live atmosphere, and individual lifestyles are pretty much accepted, as long as no one gets injured by how someone else lives. I should note the valley is a bit different from San Francisco. I remember trying to find my way back onto 101 up there, and got somewhat lost in some neighborhood. There I was, driving along, and the first thing I noticed was an old guy walking down the street wearing a thong, saying hi to a cop. Then I passed a guy walking my direction on the sidewalk wearing chaps. Nothing else, just chaps. I almost drove into a street pole. I was laughing so hard. My teenage daughter was in the car, and it didn't faze her at all. That's something you really wouldn't see in Sunnyvale or San Jose. And I heard that it's a bit rarer in San Francisco now, cause you now have to have a reason to go naked on the streets, such as the Bear Breakers, or you can get a ticket. Sigh. Traffic is pretty much the pits. It's definitely not LA, but it's quite heavy during anything approaching commute hours. Fortunately, on weekends and away from the commute, it's bearable. One thing that the heavy traffic does do is make commuting from areas where housing prices aren't so high pretty much unbearable. Housing prices and commute time are linked together, and I know people who hired in, established themselves at what might seem a probably reasonable commute distance, and then quit the company because they just couldn't live spending that many hours/day in a car. Public schools are all over the map. There are great ones and really crappy ones. As expected, it correlates to the income of the pupils' families. This is another factor that drives housing prices. You want a great school district? Be prepared to pay for it. We had horses, so needed a bit of land, and that forced us into a bit of a commute. Our local schools were just average, but things turned out fine. Both kids went to UCLA and one went on to get his PhD in EE, while the other got her MA in education. It was a big fish, little pond sort of thing, so one doesn't have to get into a great school district to do fine, though it undoubtedly helps. Taxes everywhere. The income tax is pretty stiff, as is the sales tax. And then they throw a real estate tax at you. The rate isn't terribly high, but the housing prices are such that you're still paying out the big bucks. Prop 13 limits the rate of increase, but it actually just slows the rate. An exorbitant tax becomes utterly ridiculous. If you happen to be a shooter, nowhere in California is particularly gun friendly. Sure, some communities certainly are, but there are still state laws about what guns can be legally kept in magazine capacities. I only bring this up because this is important to some folks. This is a quick list of things I could think of. If I could distill it, I'd say the high cost of living was by far the worst factor in living there. We certainly could have stayed there after retirement and lived a comfortable lifestyle, but we were sort of bored with it all, and having even more money is never a bad idea. I hated my commute, and the water bill really sucked, as did taxes, but during my working years, I didn't have real complaints about the area. There was a lot to do. The place was alive. Where I live now, the city shuts down at 10 p.m. The climate was really nice, though a bit hot in the summer where we were, and because I'm one who can see the humor in a guy wearing just chaps while walking down the street, any lifestyle issues were off the table as far as bothering me. For a 20-something with a decent job, probably $90k plus, which is probably typical entry-level high-tech, I'd say it's a great place to be. Please like and subscribe.